It's innovative and creative. Find out how these local 4th and 5th graders have a worldwide audience.
Well, creative writing takes a new turn at a local elementary school with blogging. Student bloggers are crossing over into the digital side. Fox 5's Christina Lee explains how it all sparks creativity.
In this 4th and 5th grade class at Garrison Elementary School,
we're going to see the stats go through the roof.
Mr. Josh Schwartz is motivating his students through blogging.
What I'm trying to do is open up the faucet for their creativity.
Kids Like Blog started 4 months ago. Since, 25 students have put together their own online portfolios where they can write
pretty much anything
and upload their artwork.
These kids are writing so much, it's ridiculous. Over their vacations, on the weekends.
Before 10-year-old Ronnie Fleming became a blogger, he barely wrote 10 words on a piece of paper.
Since I got a blog now, I'm really enjoying writing on paper and my blog.
Each student gets to choose their own blog title.
Think, Dream, Laugh.
Snoopy Lover.
Crazy Rider Rocks.
The Art and Stories of Superdog.
But the coolest part about it, students try and attract an audience through their writing.
I like people noticing my blog.
Really cool because they're not actually looking at me, but they're actually looking at my writing.
Some of them have received hits all the way from Malaysia.
I train them on internet safety, and they know not to reveal any information about who they are, where they live.
Readers also get to comment on their blogs.
I like writing.
Well, I always kind of wanted to be a writer.
Now, if you want to see any of their work, we've linked some of their blogs to our website, fox5sandiego.com, and click the Scene on tab. Reporting in Oceanside, I'm Christina Lee, Fox 5 News.
Fox 5 News.
Hi, my name's Natalie Bullock. I'm a student achievement consultant with Learning Support Services, and I work in the area of mathematics. I've been involved in a project that we call Investigate, Create, Talk About Math, abbreviated ICT Math. We've been working with a number of teachers over 2 years. The teachers involved in this project have also been involved in our other math inquiry projects that involve teaching through problem solving. Teachers in the first year of our project were given access to 6 iPods and a device called Reflector, or I guess it's not a device, it's a software application called Reflector. In the second year of our project, teachers were given access to 3 iPad minis and Apple TV, which Reflector is very like. When the technology first rolled out into the schools, teachers were quite excited to explore a variety of apps and right away downloaded a good number of math-related apps. Students then used the devices in ways that they were able to practice their math thinking, or in a few cases they were able to find devices that worked as virtual manipulatives like the GeoBoard app. But they didn't really further the thinking of the projects, the initial project that we were involved in, teaching through problem solving. So we kind of shifted our stance and we helped bring to light some other apps. We looked at our apps such as Note Anytime, Explain Everything, and EduCreations. And these apps were not specific to math at all, but they were devices or apps that allowed teachers and students to capture thinking while they worked. So students who were solving math problems could use the device as a tool for solving their problem. They could record their voices as they worked together. They could write on the tablet to show their thinking. They could take pictures of the manipulatives that they were using to solve the problem and put it together to submit to the teacher as their work. Teachers that were then able to broadcast or share student work through the device using their Apple TV. They were able to broadcast students' work through the Apple TV where the class could see how students solved the problem, and teachers could use exact student voices to consolidate the math. Teachers were also able to access student thinking for assessment purposes. They could see how groups of students worked together from the beginning to the end of their task, and use this information to plan next steps and to provide feedback for their students. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Laurie Corrigan. I'm principal of St. Thomas Aquinas Catholic Secondary School in Lindsay. I wanted to learn online because I wanted to decrease my time commuting, particularly in weather conditions like the ones we've been having. And then I discovered that learning in integrated digital technologies was a great way of connecting with the learning community of others who all had different kinds of technological ability. I'm an artsy. I learned that learning in an online environment was not a linear process. It could be constructed or reconstructed or deconstructed. It was a dynamic process that shifted from side to side, and it required the development of multiple modalities of learning as well, a skill that many of our students and we too can possess. It also creates an environment that allows for challenges, and it's in those challenges, I think, through growth mindsets, that we have the opportunity to move ahead. Or, as Pope Francis reminds us, we have an opportunity not to be afraid of failing. But the best part about learning in a digital learning environment is that at every meeting, you always get to bring your pug. Nothing's better than that.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Berlingeri, and I'm a student achievement consultant working in learning support services. For the past 2 years, I've been involved with the 21st Century Library Project. The 21st Century Library Project is an opportunity for library support specialists, teacher librarians, computer services staff, and learning support services staff to get together to talk about what is happening with technology in our libraries. It's an opportunity to explore the technology that's being provided for libraries, which includes iPads and netbooks, and look at best uses. This project positions the library support specialists and teacher librarians as co-learners and exploring what technology can do to support student learning. We hope in the next few years to have the 21st Century Library Project extended to all of our schools.
Twitter teachers are better teachers. Despite what you may have been led to believe, Twitter is not actually about what you had for breakfast. Did you know that Twitter can be used to help you become a better teacher? This video will help you use Twitter to develop a professional learning network, or a PLN. The beauty of the PLN is that it functions as your own ongoing professional development source for any topic you want to know more about. Not only that, but it can even function as a support network, because let's face it, teaching can be a lonely profession. Once you make your Twitter account, make sure to leave it public. You have two choices. You can choose to just observe and read what others write, which is absolutely okay and a great way to get started. Or you can choose to participate in the conversation as well. The very first thing to do is to find some people to follow who have useful things to say. Teachers don't have time to read what others have for breakfast. Two fantastic educational Twitter folks are Alan November and Tony Vincent. To find them, type their names into the search bar and then click follow under their names. You can unfollow anyone at any point as well. You can also follow any professional organizations that interest you. For instance, the U.S. Office of Educational Technology has great resources, as well as ISTE, or the International Society for Technology and Education. For a list of high-quality teachers to follow, go to this blog post. Lucky for you, many people follow back the people who follow them, so you'll soon have people following you too. Now start reading. Follow links and see what others are doing in their classrooms. Feel free to join in the conversation by composing your own tweets or replying to others. Be aware that @replies are public. Retweet anything you think others would be interested in as well. Another method of categorization on Twitter is the hashtag, which allows you to see everything anyone has posted using that particular category. Some hashtags you might try searching are education, edchat, SSchat for social studies, or mathsjam. Here are some more great education hashtags. To truly make this a two-way street for professional development, contribute your own 2 cents. If someone calls out for advice or ideas on a topic, @reply with your ideas so everyone can benefit. You are an expert too. When others see your response, they know you have worthwhile things to say and will likely follow you. Other ways to get people to follow you include having an updated profile and image, posting links to useful content, including your own blog posts, etc., tweet on a regular basis, but not every 10 minutes, and use the @ mention or reply to make people aware of what you have to say. Now, when you are confused, stuck, overwhelmed, or just curious, and you put a message out to your followers, you will have your own personal professional development session with exactly what you need when you need it. Now that's personalized learning. Start your own professional learning network on Twitter today.
Good morning. My name is Rob Majdell, and I'm the principal at St. Mary's Catholic Secondary School in Coburg. And I've been asked to speak a little bit about the advantages of social media in this digital world and how we can engage and connect not only parents and students, but our whole school community, all our stakeholders. And I think it's been an excellent opportunity to do that. However, there are some things that you have to take into consideration, especially regarding building capacity, someone in your building that can do that, and sustainability. With all the demands placed on a school, how do you keep this going, as you probably all are well aware of. I'm fortunate in my building. I have someone who has a strong expertise, is very passionate, not only about what she does, but about the community at large. And you'll talk to her and meet her shortly. Her name is Dawn Clapperton. And so capacity, building capacity, although we are trying to train more and more people, I've been fortunate that way. In terms of sustainability, what I found is using social media allows me to streamline our communication, and in fact, it's probably saves some time. For example, I find that I don't have to use newsletters monthly anymore, because all the information is going out to parents on the website. More and more parents are subscribing to our website. As of date, we have over 500 subscribers in a school population of 750. So once again, we're finding an excellent way to engage our school community. We are also fortunate in the school council who use their program to purchase fridge magnets, staying connected with St. Mary's, and all the information on how to do that is on those fridge magnets. So we give those to all our students vis-a-vis the report cards. We also use stickies on the report cards on how to enter or get into the website. And so those are ways of sort of getting that information out to parents. And so anyways, I hope what we're talking about this morning is very helpful to you. And I know that Dawn go from there.
We have three things that are our main ways of communicating. First is our website. We also have a Facebook page, and we also have several Twitter feeds. And what we've been able to do is kind of connect all three. If I enter something on one, it'll repeat on the others automatically. We also use our Gmail calendar to post all daily events and activities. So I'm just going to show you the screen to start with. In Gmail itself, we created a staff calendar, and we have a public calendar. Gail in the front office posts everything in red. I go through and see if it's something relevant to parents in the community. I repost it in the public one. This one here actually feeds onto our school calendar on our website. I'm just opening that to show you what they will see. So our parent community see this on a daily basis, and it's always current. Also on our website is a widget of our Twitter feeds. So this is our main school Twitter feed, and if parents don't have Twitter, they can always come to the website and see all our daily announcements and that sort of thing right here. We also have a subscription button that allows people to get any of this information that's posted in the news section automatically emailed to them. So that's where we post a lot of our board-related information and our newsletters. The banner here on our website rotates through 4, or anything that's a larger event that needs published, we put it in here, like a grade 8 open house. We also post, this is exactly what the magnet looks like so that they can follow the other things. Then we go over to our Facebook page. This is where I take daily announcements. Daily announcements from the front office after they're read, and I bring them over here and I'll repost them for everyone. I post birthdays, which I can actually do. Say this birthday is in 3 weeks. I can go in and create an event and post it at 12 midnight the day of the person's birthday. So I enter these things once a month, not every day, and they automatically post. I enter all our post-secondary information in the event section, so that gets reposted. So anything that I put in here is linked to Twitter. So when you go into Twitter, my main feed is everything that is posted from Facebook. So I enter it once and it gets posted back over into here. In Twitter itself, I follow 131 different associations and community events and that kind of stuff, so I'll repost what I think is relevant to our community. So every morning I go through and I'll look through feeds, and if I think it's a good feed, I repost it on ours. If you are in Facebook and you want to post a PDF that you might get, you do have to go into Adobe Acrobat, open it up, and save it as a JPEG, and then you can bring the photos in. I believe that might be it. It's a work in progress. It's a great way to streamline things, and if anybody has any questions or suggestions, you can always email me. Thanks.
Good day, everyone. My name is Liz Brioux, and I teach grade 2-3 at St. Mary's School in Lindsay. And I have been asked today to share with you a little bit about how we're using technology in our classrooms to help improve student learning. I'm very fortunate this year to be working on a TLLP project with my partners Michelle Harrison and Julie Crowder in our ELKP program. And our project is basically looking at how do we engage our students more in the AFL process. In particular, that whole descriptive feedback component and setting those individual learning goals. So basically what's happening is we have 10 iPads in both classes. Our students are using the iPad to document their learning. They're taking pictures, they're taking videos of their work. They are airdropping photos and stuff to us, so we don't have to, no longer do we need to go and take all our photos off all our iPads. The kids are immediately send them to our own iPad. And we're also using the iPads to AirPlay them up on the smartboard so that students can share their work with their friends, share their work with their class, so that we can provide that instantaneous feedback that they desire to, that they need in order to improve their work. They're all very eager to share their work. Everyone wants to put their work up on the smartboard, and they're really catching on to the whole descriptive feedback piece, and we're seeing a lot of improvement in student learning. For the teacher component, teachers are using their iPads as an organizational tool for their anecdotal and observational notes. We are using Google Form to record student observations, so no longer are our sticky notes all over our classrooms showing what we observed that day of students. It immediately goes into our Google Form, which then correlates in our spreadsheets in Google Drive, which is making reporting periods and progress reports just way easier when we go to do our comments and really assess our students and how far they've come. Because it's all organized, it's in one space, and it's just way more efficient to use. We are also using our iPads to store our student work, so our pictures, our video, or any kind of documentation of our student learning. Using Google Drive, now that PVNC has provided us with unlimited storage. Woohoo, that's awesome, especially when you're taking lots of videos. To document our student learning and to really have kind of electronic and a digital file. Very great files to use during parent-teacher interviews. Our ELKP class used them during progress reports, and the kids were able to pull their work up on the smartboard, talk about what they were learning, and when they can talk about what they're learning, that usually indicates that the learning has occurred, which is kind of what our goal is as teachers. We are currently just starting to dive into creation of electronic portfolios, and we're really looking forward to using those at our parent-teacher interviews in January. So that's a quick glimpse of what we're doing here at St. Mary's. If you have any questions, please just give us a holler. If you have any suggestions for us, we welcome that as well. Enjoy what's left of your technology day.
Good morning. My name is Andy Sawada. I'm the principal at St. John Catholic Elementary School here in Peterborough, and I'm here this morning to talk to you about social media. At the school, we have a Facebook page and a Twitter feed. The address is at capital S, T, capital J, O, H, N, capital P, capital V, capital N, capital C. And I have my own personal Twitter feed as well at AAANDY5000. And part of the reason why we do this at the school is to help document and show some of the learning that's happening and collaborating with parents. But also we're trying to meet one of the board's strategic priorities is embedding tech to support digital literacy, creativity, innovation, and collaboration in the learning needs of the students. So I'm also modeling that by taking charge of my own professional learning and my own professional development by using Twitter as a learning tool. So I get to collaborate with educators around the world to support some of the needs that have been expressed by the staff and some of the urgent learning needs of the students. So if you haven't explored the use of social media as a learning tool, I strongly suggest that you take some time and check that out.
Hello, I would like to introduce the Cisco Networking Academy that we run at Holy Trinity. Cisco Networking Academies offer their students the ability to obtain Cisco networking certifications, which are highly regarded and sought after in industry. Though we only run introductory courses, they are stepping stones to full CCNA certification, which in turn are stepping stones to specialized certifications, some of which there's only a couple dozen people in the world which hold these particular certifications. We became a Cisco Networking Academy through our dual credit partnership with Fleming College, a partnership which has allowed HT students access to Fleming equipment, Fleming materials, and most importantly, Fleming instructors. Students have been given college-level instruction and exposed to college-level assessments, and in doing so are better prepared and knowledgeable about what to expect of life beyond high school, whether it be in a work environment, whether it be in some sort of tertiary education. It's been a very rewarding partnership indeed. In the courses taught through the Cisco Networking Academy, students gain a theoretical knowledge of how all this computer equipment works together and allows electronic communication to occur. There's also a significant hands-on component where students work with industry standard equipment, building and maintaining their own computer systems and networks. They work in wired environments, going so far as building their own network cables, which is what Adam here is doing. Cabling up some new servers that he built, configured, and is now deploying. They work in wireless environments, setting up, configuring, and securing wireless access points. They learn why it just works straight out of the box. Though easily and desirable, is fraught with security issues, and security is the name of the game, whether we like it or not. Cisco networking certification is a challenge. It is a challenging program, and there's no doubt that it requires a lot of problem solving, it requires intuition and patience. However, as society becomes more and more technologically infused, it's becoming more and more like the Land of Oz. And we need people to peel back that curtain, people who can work with the technology and, more importantly, control it and manipulate it, bend it to their wishes. That is what we're hoping to create here, those types of people. Thank you for listening.
We had a great experience here at St. Luke with a virtual author visit. I had read online that children's author Kate Messner would do Skype visits with classes who read her books. So I got a copy of her book, Marty McGuire, and I booked a Skype visit for a few weeks later on. And I told the kids before we even started that they would have a chance to speak with the author at the end. So when the date came, Kate, who was also a teacher, Skyped with us from her school, and the kids had a chance to go up to the camera and ask them questions about herself and about her writing process, and it really made it meaningful for them.
And a service that I use is called Remind 101. So essentially it's a web-based service. Students can essentially, they will text a message code to a set phone number. That then creates them as a subscriber for any number of classes or teams that I create. So in this case I have outdoor ed, but I also have, one for my floorball team, one for my rugby team, for my grade 9 class, my grade 11 class. And essentially it's an instant way to make announcements or give instructions or to send out messages. So my t-shirts arrived, period 2, so I send them a message saying come and pick them up. Within 2 minutes they're arriving to pick them up. I remind them of a test tomorrow, or I'll change our plan. So instead of being in the gym, I'll explain we're outside. So now they know before they leave school, so it's sent at 7:24. They know I need a jacket, I need a toque. Reminder to bring food for Algonquin, or for Christmas hampers or whatever. Assignments are due, life jackets need to come in, all that kinds of stuff. For rugby, or any kind of team, it'll be an announcement reminding them what time the bus leaves, how much it costs, who's supposed to be coming, any kind of deadlines for quizzes, tests, things like that for any other class. So it's a very instant way for me to communicate with all of my students or players. There is no longer the excuse of I didn't get it or I didn't hear that, etc. Oh, it is one way. I will never see any of their numbers. It's a web-based service. So when they become a subscriber, all I see is what they're subscribed in. I can't access their phone number. There's no worry of any kind of that. I can't reply to them or text them individually using my phone and their phone. This is a web-based, computer-based service, so I never see any of that stuff. Students.
Hi, I'm Paul Hough from Pope John Paul II in Lindsay. In January, we had the opportunity to host the Premier of Ontario, Kathleen Winn, for a Google Hangout with our grade 8 students. It was a really great opportunity for the kids to meet the Premier and ask questions and hear from her ideas on a bunch of issues that they really cared about. It was really interesting to hear the student perspective that they actually felt that they had been in the room with the Premier, and really for the amount of work that went into preparing, it was maybe 15 minutes to get do a sound test and a video test, make sure that the system was working properly, and the kind of normal things that you would do when you have a guest speaker coming in. The payoff was just amazing. So really can't say enough about Google Hangout as being just a great forum for this kind of thing. It's a great opportunity to bring the outside world into our classrooms, and I'm sure everybody has someone in their contact list or from their life that they could bring in and host a hangout with for no cost with very little work. So again, can't say enough about Google Hangout as a medium, and you should definitely consider using it.
Asking anyone who borrows our iPads not to move things around, so we have to make sure that we don't do that as well. All right? So if you take a look up in the top here, it says Mrs. Donnelly.
And how much did it add up to when you used a ruler? How many centimeters?
10 for the top.
Yeah. Okay.
Per team. So let's put that in.
total, there are 3 groups of 5 and 2 diagrams.
The brands so that my peers could choose from a more variety of.
I'm happy to share all my hard work with you all. Here you go. You like this. His name is Blue. Blue is silly. Blue is funny too. Blue has pointy teeth and pointy nails. You really taught me to climb things. Maybe next time I could take my time doing it.
My name is Sean Heuchert. I'm the Manager of Information Technology, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Catholic Education in a Digital World Day. First of all, I'd like to thank the Principal Advisory Team for helping plan the day and developing the resources we're using for the day. The members of the Principal Advisory Team are Derek Abrams, Diane Mather, Gerard van den Wildenberg, Jackie Craig, Laurie Corrigan, and Mark Collins. We really could not have put the day together without their help, so thank you. I'd also like to thank the best IT team in the land. They're in your schools, they're here at the board office, helping to make sure that this day runs smoothly. Thank you. You're going to hear a lot of new ideas today. Some of your colleagues will share what they're doing in their classrooms, and you'll hear a lot about the digital world in which we live. I want you to understand that I know it can be scary. If you think about historical, technological advances, fire, the wheel, manufacturing, cars, airplanes, anything, the last 10 years is the first time in human history where our children know more about technology than we do. This day is to challenge you to learn. When this idea of streaming a system-wide PA day over the internet started to take shape, I was scared. I had no idea how to live stream an event. So I did what my kids do. I Googled it. I tried a few things, it didn't work. I read a little more, and things started to take shape. I tested and retested, and here we are today. I hope it works for all of us, but it may not, and that's okay. We'll all learn something. I encourage you, after today is done, try something new in the digital world. Blog, tweet, post a video on YouTube, try one thing new. The digital world has its ups and downs, but we can't ignore it. Our students are counting on us. So in closing, I hope this day is one of good learning, great discussions with your colleagues. Please enjoy and have a great day.
Welcome to our day of shared learning focused on the theme Catholic Education in a Digital World. Our learning goal for today is to deepen our individual and collective capacity for leveraging technology to the achievement and well-being of all of our students. As a system, we're committed to creating learning environments that provide students with rich learning tasks and experiences so they can meet our Catholic graduate expectations. Our digital world has changed fundamental aspects of our own lives, of the way we communicate, conduct business, and avail of services. Many of us marvel at how swiftly and profoundly this has happened. However, our students tend not to marvel because this is the world they were born into. Being online is a natural extension of themselves. This natural sense of comfort is something we can build on and use to support students in their learning. The unparalleled access to information has shifted the traditional roles of teachers and textbooks as the primary sources of content knowledge, and this allows us to focus on deeper learning skills such as effective communication, creativity, critical thinking, and collaboration. It changes what is possible for our students to do in our classrooms. Technology breaks down barriers and provides opportunities for all our students to discover, to create, to apply their knowledge. This is the real potential of technology, to profoundly impact their learning by giving them the tools to use their knowledge in the world in real time on issues and problems that matter. And that's why we're here today, to learn more about how we can unlock this potential in our classrooms. Like our faith journey, each of us may be at different stages, but we're all moving toward the same end. We need to have the courage to open ourselves to new learning. It is our hope that today's opportunity to hear from some experts and to have time to dialogue and to reflect with colleagues will inspire each of us to implement one or two strategies for leveraging technology in teaching and learning practices. Working together, we can achieve, through learning, leading, and serving, excellence in Catholic education. Thank you so much for your participation.
Hi everyone. I would now like to introduce our Catholic Education in a Digital World panel. Ann Saftich, National Teaching and Learning Manager for IBM's K-12 division. Father Jerry Tavares, Parish Priest for St. Alphonsus in Peterborough. And Barbara McMorrow, Director of Education. Our first question for the panel is, we are seeing a decline in desktop PCs and even laptops in students' homes as tablets and smartphones take over. How can educators adapt to this shift in access for students? Fewer workstations, physical keyboards, and word processing devices? Barb, why don't you start us off?
Thank you, Sean. And first, just say, I want to say good morning and welcome to everybody. It's been very exciting to be getting ready for our first virtual learning opportunity here in PVNC. So I think that the willingness of educators to be open to new learning and to adapt to the shifting landscape of our learning environments is key. And I think it's pretty similar, and I think we're already very familiar as educators to being open to adapting and being open to understanding the needs of our students, the needs of all of our students, to ensure that our instructional and assessment practices are in fact attuned to their varying needs and are differentiated. And so I think the movement away from the rigid, static desktop or fixed computer labs allows us to have a tremendous amount of flexibility and adaptability in our classrooms. And I think that it's a way to be more timely and impactful in meeting the needs of our students. But I think that sense of adapting and being responsive in the moment to our students is something that we really do understand as educators, and I definitely see our ability to leverage technology for that as helping us to be able to go further.
Anne?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So again, I'm honored to be here, so thank you for inviting me. I work with districts across the country, and I know in the question it implies that we're seeing a decline in laptops. We're not actually seeing that decline in students' homes. When we talk to students, they tell us, no, they still have laptops and workstations, but we're seeing an overwhelming number of them choosing to bring their mobile device, typically their smartphone, with them to school. And when we ask them why, they tell us it's because it's more portable and they can keep it more secure more easily when they're at school. So I guess the question you have to ask yourself, and the other thing that students are telling us is when we do focus groups or surveys, they tell us that on average, they have access to school technology a couple times a week or less, unless they're in a computer-based classroom in most of the districts I deal with. So when we think about can we really impact their learning experience with technology in that way, it's really hard to. But what if we took advantage of those devices they're bringing with them? So the question we then get asked is, can a smartphone really be the device of choice for learning? And you know, in 2007, the average screen size was 3 inches on a phone. By 2014, now the average size is about 5 inches. And we really believe that in the last year, the answer to that question is yes. Now that the screen size is bigger, we're seeing kids do unbelievable things with smartphones, no matter what the device is. So they can blog, they can write, they can create, they can do simulations and synthesize and demonstrate their knowledge. So when we talk with our districts and our teachers, what we're saying is we really need to embrace those devices, figure out how to bring your own device, whatever that is. You need classroom management strategies. You need your kids to agree on how to use them. We encourage our teachers to help the kids develop the policies they're going to use in classroom. And you have to deal with those times when they are misused, like any classroom behavior that doesn't conform with your code of conduct. So we encourage teachers, think about how you're going to do that, have kids talk about how they can use those devices, and really embrace them in your practice.
Thank you. Father Jerry?
Well, one of the things that I look at is how we are actually able to communicate with our students and with their families. Because the shift has happened where people are bringing their cell phones to school or in my case to church, is how do we share with them the information in a way that is accessible for them. So we have to make sure that our information is actually viewable on a phone. You know, some websites you can't actually see unless you had a desktop or something. So we've made it so that our information goes out that way. But it is important for us to even not be afraid of it. As priests, it's quite intimidating going into a classroom with the technology if we're not embracing it. So I love to be able to use Twitter and to use Facebook to access and to spread out some information. So to be able to know where these people are coming from, where the kids are coming from, and their families is important to us. To me it is anyway, so that I can effectively communicate with them and give them examples.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, how can digital technology be best leveraged to transform the traditional pedagogical relationship between learner, teacher, and content? We'll start with you this time, Father.
Well, I take a look at, again, from my perspective, of being able to use this technology to share the matters of faith. I think that we can't separate faith from who we are. It's very much a part of who we are. So I take a look at using things like my iPad during a homily. Regularly at St. Alphonsus, if you're able to stop by, I use my iPad when I preach. I use it after Mass to talk to people and to show people examples of faith. So when I'm giving an example about a place in Rome that I want to talk about, or a quote from Scripture, I pop the words on the screen. People are different learners. People are very visual. I'm visual, so that's how I think. And I'm sure that the students are able to connect in a different way to that when we have those Masses. Parents certainly do. There is a shift after Mass when people come and talk to you and say, you know, Father, that's how I learn. I need to be able to see those things, and it's quite helpful. So I think the technology actually becomes a part of how we're teaching it, as opposed to just being a tool to use for teaching. It becomes very much a part of how we're teaching it.
Thank you. Barb?
Well, I couldn't agree more with what Father Jerry said, and when he was talking in terms of using his iPad for his homilies, and I'm thinking of the opportunity that we have to really create a lot more equitable opportunities for our students. Many of our students may never get the opportunity to tour the Vatican, to be in St. Peter's Basilica, but every one of them can be able to do that with technology. They can be on a virtual tour, and that's something that could easily be integrated into the learning. I think it's really important to be able to see technology not as a substitution for the way that we may have used textbooks or blackboards in the past, but really to help us to be able to be a lot more impactful in connecting our students to the real world. I think what's really key for us as educators is to embrace a learning stance and not to be intimidated. I think, Father, you talk about the clergy being intimidated, but I think as educators we can continue to be, because as I mentioned, our students were born into this world, and for us, we're still amazed at what can happen. Even today, I can't help but think, wow, this is just incredible to see this technology that we're being surrounded with. So I think that idea of creating a learning stance, of being co-learners with our students and co-learners with our colleagues, and being open to the learning that we can get from them. And I think expanding that to have a genuine sense of developing meaningful learning relationships with our families, with our parishes, with the larger community. I think that is another thing that can help us with understanding how technology can move us deeper in our learning, deeper in our faith, and in our leadership and in our service.
Over to you, Anne.
Thanks. It's interesting because my response was very much around, traditionally there's been walls to prevent people from getting free access to information, and you both talked about that, how we can change that experience by with that instant access. And so it changes from where the teacher was a curator and the deliverer of the knowledge to the students really being the navigators of that knowledge journey. And when I thought about that, there's a couple things that are critical to make it happen though. So we have to have access, which we talked about in the last question. And so even just with a smartphone or any kind of device in the hands of our students and teachers, that access now becomes easily able to do. So then the second thing, because the question was about how do you transform that traditional experience and relationship. The second thing we have to really think about is how do we arm students and teachers with the skills they're going to need to navigate all that knowledge that's a click away. So they're going to need to have those 21st century skills that include responsible use and the ability to really critically think about what they're seeing and make sense of it. And then the other thing I was thinking when I was kind of writing my response was, what is the role of the teacher and the student now? And we know the teacher goes from that traditional curator to the knowledge, almost the advisor on that knowledge journey, and the mentor and the coach. And the student owns the role of navigating. So can you imagine the change in our students' learning as if I was an athlete, which my daughter is, and you could take your passion that you're interested in, and the teacher brings to the table the big ideas, and we explore that with the passion of each child. So my daughter did an assignment. She had to look at the concepts in grade 11 physics, and she did it in the terms of basketball and what's the impact of force and gravity on a free throw shot in basketball. So suddenly her engagement went up, and her ability to demonstrate and talk and reflect on her knowledge was vastly different than it used to be. And simply because the knowledge is there, and it's how do we take advantage of it.
Thank you. John McWhorter, in his TED Talk, Texting is Killing Language, argues that it's not true that texting is writing, but rather part of the emergence of language and has its own complexity. The question for the panel is, how should educators rethink literacy? Anne, please start us off.
Yeah, so I'm going to read a definition, actually. So when I looked at this question, I thought, well, what is literacy today? So I went to the National Council of Teachers of English, and they have a really clear definition of 21st century literacy. So if you will beg I'll beg your indulgence. I'm going to read you the definition and then just kind of tie it back to what John says in his TED Talk. So their definition says that literacy has always been a collection of cultural and communicative practices shared among members of particular groups. And they go on to say that because technology has increased the intensity and complexity of literate environments, the 21st century demands that a literate person possess a wide range of abilities and competencies, so many literacies. And they actually define kind of 6 things that a digital literate person in the 21st century needs to do. So I'm going to read them quickly, and 2 of them I think are particularly important in this discussion today. So the first thing they say is people have to be able to develop proficiency and fluency with the actual technology tools. The second is you have to build intentional cross-cultural connections and relationships with others, so to pose and solve problems collaboratively and strengthen independent thought. You have to be able to design and share information for global communities to meet a variety of purposes. You need to manage, analyze, and synthesize multiple streams of simultaneous information, which I think is incredibly important when we think about how overwhelming this information access can be. You have to be able to create, critique, analyze, and evaluate multimedia texts. And then probably another key one is attend to the ethical responsibilities required by these complex environments. So when we look at what John says, and he talks about this fingered speech, which he says is actually a new language, and he talks about it as a linguistic miracle, and we're watching it before our eyes where these kids are developing another language. So they're becoming multilingual, and the beauty of it is they can make their thinking visible to each other and kids not even in the same classroom so quickly. And so as teachers, you need to really think about how can I embrace this new language, encourage my kids to use it to, again, make their thinking visible, collaborate, communicate. But at the same time, we can't lose sight of that other language that we know. And that I, as an employer, am looking for when your students come to us as successful candidates to be employed, I still need them to be very proficient in that first, more formal language. So I think we need to embrace this new one, but at the same time, we need to find ways to encourage formal writing and formal speaking and all the traditional ways that we communicate as well.
Thank you. Father Jerry.
One of the things that I would look at that, I mean, it's a very good thing to be able to express oneself that quickly. You know, as you kind of hinted at, it's quite remarkable. The problem is, though, I think, is that there isn't enough time to be able to think about what's being said or how it's being said. And so oftentimes we have cases where people are getting their feelings hurt or bullying kind of happens so quickly because we're not able to reflect on what it is that we're saying. You know, and back in the day when you would deliver mail by pigeons, you know, you'd had time to reflect upon what you wrote. You wrote it down, you thought about it, and then you sent it, and there was time for it to get there. Well, now it's so instant and it's so quick that there isn't that reflective time. And so very often things are said that you would want to take back, and now you can't because in many cases, in social media anyway, it's so public. So there is kind of that caution there. I mean, the Pope even talks about this great form of self-expression. It's a good thing to be able to communicate like that, but to be careful how we do it. We have to look at all the people around us and still look at them with love. So,
thank you. Barb.
When I first read the question, it made me think of haiku poetry, because I was thinking in terms of texting and how we really need to distill our thinking down to such few words and to such few characters. And so there's a component of it that hopefully is making us more reflective, in that we want to pare down what we want to say to the essence, and that often takes a lot more time. But I agree that the reality is often that we don't take that time. So I think that our need to really understand and talk and think a lot about what it means to be an effective communicator. We articulate that in our Catholic Graduate Expectations, which is our way of elegantly putting together what we would describe as 21st century learning skills. And certainly in 2014, we cannot be an effective communicator without having very, very strong digital literacy skills. And so I think being very intentional in teaching that, but I think also in being very intentional and focused on helping students to understand what it means to be reflective and what it means to be able to write and to articulate our ideas, and that it isn't just being able to do it fast and quickly and putting things out there. Because I think that sense of understanding that, first of all, so much of the information that we get, we need to be able to synthesize it. We need to be able to be critical about it. We need to be able to think about, well, where's the source of this information? Where's the bias that coming from? And that in expressing ourselves, that we have to be taking that time to be reflective and to be critical in what it is that we are trying to say. So I think it's a very exciting time. I think it's a wonderful time to be an English teacher, or to be teaching young people to read, because the tools that we have so readily at our disposal. But I absolutely think that we need to be dialoguing about how we can use them differently and how we can use them more effectively. And I think it's only that you can, in the same way with writing poetry and haiku poetry in particular, but any kind of poetry, you can only use the components of poetry if you're able to understand the formal language structures. I think oftentimes when people get upset around spelling mistakes or not using capital letters, and I think of some of the great poets and their ability to use language, and for instance, E. Cummings or James Joyce, where they really helped us to look at language in a different way. So I think there's a real richness right now that, again, I believe that the technology and if we're using it in a way that leverages us for learning, allows us to be able to go to those deeper thinking skills. And you were talking about that, and that whole idea of being able to, what we used to call Bloom's taxonomy, and the higher order thinking skills, where we move from comprehension and knowledge to synthesis and application and evaluation. So to me, it's really in a wonderful era to be an educator.
Thanks, folks. Our next question is a two-parter. What does it mean to be a reflective thinker in an always connected and digital world? Does technology necessarily inhibit pause and reflection? Barb?
I think we can leverage technology to actually create times during the day for our students to disconnect, or to use technology to actually create that space and that time for Christian meditation and prayer. Two of my favorite websites are Sacred Space, and you can Google that and look at that. I use that on a daily basis. And another one that I just discovered recently was Prayer on the Go, which begins with an Ignatian spirituality, but is marvelous because it has just amazing music, and being able to listen to it really puts you into a different frame of mind. And I think that's an excellent resource that we can share with our students. I also believe very strongly that we do need to leverage technology in the classroom, but I also think we need to be intentional in showing students how we can disconnect when there is opportunity in the classroom to put the technology aside, our personal devices, the smart boards, all the rest of it, and be really purposeful in having students look at each other, look eye to eye with each other, sit face to face, create opportunities for students to be able to share a meal together, and remember what that etiquette looks like and what it is to be fully present to others. I think technology can allow us to be Skyped in and be present in ways that we never imagined. But I think because of that, and because technology is so ubiquitous, it's really important for us in our classrooms and as educators to create that time and space, to make it sacred in terms of being able to really be fully present to one another. I think we need to be intentional in teaching our young people genuine learning skills, deep listening skills.
Thank you. Anne?
Yeah, completely agree with you, Barb. And as I thought about this question, it really is easy to become numb to all the messages and information we hear on a daily basis. And it takes a really concerted effort to kind of to attend to it and then take that time to be that reflective thinker we need to be. And when I read you the NCTE's definition of literacy, 2 of those really stood out to me in this one. So if I'm more fluent with technology tools, I can more easily get at the information I need and know what the information is that I want to actually attend to. And then if I have that other skill about being able to analyze and critically assess whether it's good information, I can kind of sift through all of that, and then which would free up my time to be more reflective about it. But then the last thing on this is, the second part of the question was, does it actually inhibit us from being reflective and taking that pause? And absolutely it can, but like Barb said, the beauty of technology is I can hit pause anytime I want. I can rewind and rewatch a YouTube video. I can stop it completely. I can reread. I can ask someone what they think about it and do a reflection with someone else. So if we have the self-control and the self-regulation to do that pause, then I think technology lets us do it at our own pace in our own place. And that's the beauty of the technology. So the important role of the teacher in all this is helping kids understand the importance of taking that time to reflect, which you said, and then encouraging them to do it so that the reflections we do are more meaningful and we have an opportunity to share them.
Thank you. Father Jerry.
I also agree. I mean, Barb, I think what you're talking about is very beautiful at the beginning about these different resources that you can have, whereby you can access this information, these spiritual things. I have a habit of posting every day. I mean, they're pre-planned posts, but we post every day on our Facebook page the thought of the day. Like, what's the scripture about today? What's a take-home message? What's the next step? And how God's working in your life. That you can think about that and pray with that, and maybe even bring it up at the kitchen table. So there are a lot of these resources that are really, really good. And I think that we have to be open to those. You know, the world is connected. You know, how can you text salvation in 140 characters? How can you text about God's love in that short amount of time? Well, you can with some little things, but you can use this great tool of technology to really touch the soul and help us grow. At the same time, though, you can be too connected, and it does inhibit the ability to think and to reflect, because the world is just so busy. Everything is going on. Information is coming at you so fast that you can get caught up in that whirlwind, and you don't have time to sit down and think about things. You know, think about what this message really means to me, or what God is saying to me, instead of just flicking through to the next YouTube video. You know, or we have families who sit around a kitchen table for Thanksgiving, and you've got siblings texting to each other right across the table. To be able to unplug from this, it does sort of get in the way of our growth or our ability to be relational with one another. Part of what it is to be Christian is to be relational, to actually care about what the person's talking about next to you, and not to be glued necessarily to technology. So it has its beautiful pluses, but we have to be careful that it doesn't take away from those little moments where it can cause us to reflect and to think and to be communal and personal with people.
Thank you. The next question for the panel is there a disconnect between the discussion of the great potential of technology in the classroom and the practical, meaningful implementation of it for our students? Father Jerry?
I think there might be a disconnect because there's a lot of things that are going on, right? There's a lot of teaching and all of that material, and yet if we're not using it effectively, or if we're not using it properly, if we don't know how to use it, or the technology doesn't work, like we can't always rely on it. I'll give you a very practical example of what's kind of happening to me. I use my iPad in my homilies, as I mentioned, and sometimes when I'm airplaying and I'm connected to my Apple TV, it boots me out. So we can't rely on that. And I think when we have this easy technology, we rely on them, and when it doesn't work, it's super frustrating. So we have to be able to have that, and at the same time, to use it in an appropriate manner. I think when I think of the classroom, technology can be great. I mean, again, like I said, to be able to post in 140 characters something great, but it could be done inappropriately too. So to always have that frame, that mind frame, that thought of what am I saying? How am I saying it? How is it going to come across? And who am I touching? Because like once it's out there, and everybody can see it.
Thank you. Barb?
I think like anything that we aspire to, there's often that disconnect, and I think that we have to always realize that we're on that journey. and I also believe that embracing a growth mindset and opening ourselves up to what the potential is around leveraging that technology. And I think understanding in a deep way that the technology, it's not a substitution. I think we really have to be very clear about the role of the teacher and what it is that we need to be doing as educators, that it can't be substituted by technology. In fact, it's the technology that allows us to be freed up to genuinely create those relationships with our students, to be really responsive to them and really responsive to their needs, because it can, if it's used effectively, move us away from some of the more mundane tasks that can now be done. But at the same time, I think we really have to understand that technology is not a substitution. I think we're on the right journey. I think it is going to take lots of learning for everybody, and understanding that and really embracing that Catholic graduate expectation for all of us, everybody in our organization, to be lifelong self-directed learners, to be open to asking our colleagues, to be open to asking students, to not being afraid to say, I don't know how to do this. I mean, there's kind of daily frustrations, I think, especially when we haven't been born into the digital world. But I think letting ourselves be vulnerable in the learning, and the learning connected with the technology, but understanding again that it really is that tool. And I think it's been well expressed by Father Jerry and Anne that's the vision, that's the vision that we're looking towards embracing and embedding technology. It's not looking to say, so if the technology fails, if the wireless isn't working, that we still have a tremendous amount of learning that can happen in the classroom, and hopefully it's the kind of learning that really brings us to being that co-learner with our students, being genuinely responsive to their needs, being able to differentiate in a real way, to help them to deepen their learning and their understanding, and helping them to apply their knowledge. And I think that is another part of the technology. It does, and I think that was mentioned before, help to break down the barriers in classrooms. It helps us to become those real global learners, those real global citizens. And again, that's to me what is very exciting about it. Is there disconnect? I think we're on the journey. I think all of us need to really not be afraid and to open ourselves up to that. And I think, as it's also been stated, having that opportunity every now and then to say technology free, because again, that technology, it's something to use to get us to that deeper understanding of what it means to be lifelong learners, what it means to be caring family members, what it means to be discerning believers and responsible citizens.
Thank you. Anne?
Yeah, this question is probably the nearest and dearest to my heart, because I've been working with schools for 25 years. And my role, when people ask me what I do, I say I help districts really deliver on that promise of technology in the classroom to change that learning experience. So what I loved about this question was it implies that we all believe there is a promise of technology, which was not the case necessarily years ago. And the question is, what do you have to do to deliver on the promise? So what are the things that need to be done? And there's some really obvious ones, and you've alluded to them. So that idea of there has to be a stable infrastructure. So we kind of know the 10 critical success factors. We know how to do them right. And it's getting the commitment of our different school districts that we work with to do it right. So it starts with infrastructure, which you guys alluded to, that if it doesn't work, we give up. And it's easy, and because we have it, the job of learning is what's important. It's not the fact that the iPad doesn't work, we're going to move to something else that does. So there's some certain common things that people accept. I have to have access. I have to have something in the classroom to use. But then there's a culture change. There's an acceptance of teachers and students and parents that, yeah, this is a really great tool when used appropriately and not to be used at all times. So when do we use it? So there's a really big professional learning demand for our teachers and for our district staff to really take hold of this and become that good at using it with their students. So I love the question, and Sean knows I could probably talk for hours on this one, but the fact that we're having the conversation of what does it take so that disconnect goes away, because we are still seeing it in many of our districts, but it absolutely is surmountable, and that's the exciting part.
Great, thank you. Our final question for the day: how can teachers effectively deal with both the distractions and advantages of digital technology in the classroom? Anne, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Sean. So this one to me is, is a recognition of the fact that it can cause distractions and there can be misuse or abuse. Not really any different than kids passing notes and doing things they used to do or still do. But we have to be cognizant of it. But we have to really look at it. I was in a meeting yesterday and they talked about this particular thing in terms of the glass half full, the glass half empty. We need to look at the advantages that technology can bring and understand ways to minimize the impact of those distractions. I think a really important part is that teachers really understand who these kids are and why this is such an important engaging tool for them and how it's part of everything else they do. So how can we take advantage of it? Have discussions. We encourage our staffs to have book club and article readings on who these kids are. What is the power of these tools? And if you understand the promise, and then as a staff you work at how can we minimize those distractions and build some guidelines for students, we know that takes it a long way. We also know in our focus groups with kids, they constantly tell us, and it said it in the article, they constantly tell us they need help with those distractions. They need people in the classroom, parents at home, helping them learn how to do that self-regulation with those devices and with those different resources. And they want that help. So I would encourage you to have those open dialogues with those kids in your classrooms or in a school where you're having them help to build the policies around how do we, as a school or in a class, minimize those distractions.
Father Jerry.
Well, I think we need to look at it as for what it is. It is a blessing. The technology is always a blessing. It helps us expand the message. So in a classroom setting, to be able to teach with these tools, in a faith setting, to be able to reach out, it is a blessing. At the same time, it can be a bit of a curse because we could rely too much on it, or it can just be something that gets in the way of the real message. And so it's to be able to balance that, right? And in a classroom setting, like you mentioned, the passing the notes. Okay, so now you can pass a text message as opposed to doing that. So to be able to enforce an understanding of love that respects everyone, that allows us to detach ourselves from those things, and at the same time, the understanding of using these things for a great benefit. See, I'm being distracted right now. For a great benefit, because that's what it can be. So in a classroom, I mean, you can use this technology for huge advantages to help kids think in ways they would have never thought before, to help them see things they would have never seen before. So to be able to balance that, I think it's kind of a both-and approach. It is both blessing and it is both curse. At the same time, how do we use it?
Thank you, and we'll give the last word to Barb.
So it's wonderful to see that you have learned self-regulation, Father Jerry, that you did not respond to your phone. I'm even far more basic. I had the phone go off to me during a board meeting one evening, and I was very embarrassed to admit I did not know how to turn it off. It was a new phone. I've since learned how to turn it off because I actually finally had the courage to ask somebody. I think that, Anne, you mentioned self-regulation, and I think that's a critically important concept. It's one that we have been familiar with in education for a long time, but I think it's kind of getting the focus right now, and we're a lot more purposeful in helping all of us to understand what that means and what that looks like in the development of our students. Today we're focusing a lot around embedding technology because it's certainly one of our critical strategic priorities, but we also talk about developing the social, emotional, spiritual, and physical well-being of our students. And so I think that notion of self-regulation for all of us is really key. So again, I think we need to be really purposeful and intentional in helping our students to develop those skills. I think we need to be able to model it by turning our phones off, by looking directly at people when we're talking to them rather than being distracted about what is on our iPhones or our iPads. I really believe that very, very passionately, that it is in modeling and in demonstrating our use of technology in ways that are life-giving, that are affirming, that are helping us to be deeper in our thinking, that are helping us to be better communicators, and also that are helping us to understand what it means to contribute and to collaborate and to work as a team. So I do believe that we have to see the technology not in terms of a distraction, but rather as as something that can even help us to know when it's time just to turn it off, when it is time to just disconnect, and to to really move to be fully present to one another in a very real sense. I think that the notion of it being the distraction again goes to teachers needing to, all of us needing to be able to help our students to self-regulate and to really be conscious of setting those norms in the classroom about appropriate use. I also think that we certainly know that there are opportunities for social media to be well beyond what it is that we can control in any kind of given situation anymore. But I think that also ups our game in really understanding what it means to be transparent, what it means to be communicating in meaningful ways to all our audiences, to all our stakeholders. So I think we're on a journey here, and I think it's a very, very, very exciting one to be embarking on. And I also want to just mention, Anne, earlier we were talking in terms of your work across districts, and I have to say that I feel and have felt since walking into the PVNC community that we are tremendously well poised. We have terrific opportunities here and tremendous resources, not only in regards to the hardware and the fact that our teachers have laptops and iPads and there's smart boards in our classrooms, but the infrastructure that we have with our human resources, with the infrastructure we have with our RT department, but also I know that in each and every one of our schools there are deep pools of resources, deep pools of knowledge with our staff, with our teachers, with our support staff, and with our students and our parent community. And I think it really is about us opening ourselves up to asking and to creating opportunities to share and to dialogue with one another.
Thank you very much to our panelists. That's a great discussion. We'll now have a break until 10:45 when we will begin the keynote presentation from our guest speaker, Michael Furtick from Taking It Global. Welcome back, everybody. It is my pleasure to introduce Michael Furtick, our keynote speaker. Michael Furtick is the co-founder of Taking It Global, which provides innovative global education programs that empower youth to understand and act on the world's greatest challenges. In the past, he turned his interest in technology into several successful online companies, including MyDesktop.com, which sold to Internet.com in 1999. In 2008, he was named by Contribute magazine as one of 10 tech revolutionaries redefining the power and face of philanthropy. Michael has appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show, presented at TED, and was named one of Teen People's 20 Teens that will change the world. Over the last decade, he has keynoted over 100 events across sectors, sharing his social media expertise and insights on youth engagement and educational reform to audiences in over 30 countries. He sits on several nonprofit boards, including Reinventing Schools Coalition and on the International Advisory Council for Microsoft's Partners in Learning program. Welcome, Michael.
Sean, hi everyone. It's wonderful to be with you today. And every time I hear the teen people, 20 teens that will change the world mentioned, it makes me feel a bit old. I'm now 32, so long gone from being a teen, but it certainly was an exciting kind of adventure growing up with technology, and I'll share some of that with you. But I wanted to start just by sharing some of the tweet deets for today. I've been having a look at some of the tweets that have gone out so far. It looks like we have a lot of active Twitter users in the audience, so I wanted to share my personal Twitter account, our Educators Taking It Global for Educators Twitter account, and the Future Friendly Schools Twitter account. And I'll be trying to monitor side by side. We'll see how it goes. For questions as well. So obviously many of you know the hashtag already, CEDW, and I look forward to incorporating any questions you might have into the talk, or I'll leave some time afterwards as well. So as Sean might have mentioned, I had a pretty early experience growing up with technology. This is a photo from our family archives when I was just 2.5 years old, and some of you might recognize the Commodore 64. It's not something I deal with today, but it only got surpassed, I think, a few years ago by the iPad, Apple iPad, as the best-selling computer of all time, the Guinness Book of World Records. My dad was as excited as I was that morning to sit down with me and teach me how to use the computer, and you can see the Fisher-Price box of educational software there, much more educational and positive than maybe some of the games and things are today. But this, I think, really kicked off the era of the blurring between consumer and creator. It was almost 2 decades later when Time magazine named the Person of the Year as you, as all of us. The fact that for the first time ever, we weren't just passive consumers of media, but the Commodore 64 and basic programming and the ability to create on these devices really was the beginning of this new era. Companies like YouTube were built completely on the contributions of their own audience. And in fact, so I was one of about 2 or 3 students in my class in kindergarten or grade 1 who was lucky to have a Commodore 64. But as of last year, there's a study called Young Canadians in a Wired World, and they found that 99% of students in Canada, grade 4 to 11, have access to the internet outside of school. So we've definitely come a long way from those early days of having to buy a separate modem to having, I think, the second highest access to broadband connectivity in the world. So it's not just the 1 or 2 or 3 students, I'm sure you all know in your classes, that have that access anymore. That's obviously changed. This is a little photo of Jean-Paul, my 2.5-year-old. We obviously limited screen time in his first 2 years, but he did certainly love to FaceTime mom or dad if we both travel a lot. So, it's amazing to see how intuitive technology is today. Back then, just loading something on the Commodore 64 required 5 or 10 different commands. And today, he comes up to my laptop and tries to swipe the screen, expecting everything to respond to his touch. So it's going to be amazing to see what the expectations are of this next generation in terms of the technology and what it does for them and what they expect from it. And so from a pretty young age, you heard a little bit from Sean about the kind of business experience or some of the startups I think I had. I didn't hear the first part of the intro, but my first business was actually in grade 2 when I set up a nature sale. And the idea was that my parents had told me at the corner store that, if I could find a way to make money, I could buy anything I wanted. But until then, I was limited to just choosing, 1 treat or candy a week. And so, of course, immediately I thought, well, what can I sell? How can I make money? And so my uncle was always up for trouble, and he helped my mom and I, or he helped me and my brother pick all the flowers out of my mom's garden. And we set up this little table at the front of our driveway, and I think people thought we were pretty cute. We sold out that first day. But of course, it was a lesson in sustainability because the next day there were no more flowers left. So the first business experience, not so positive. But it was a few years later when I was in grade 4 or 5, and I was a big baseball and hockey fan. I got to go to both World Series when the Blue Jays made it. Hopefully that'll happen again sometime soon. And I always had sports cards in a mess all over the house. And I remember it was a trip to Kmart when I had learned about this new invention called a modem. And I had to try to figure out, well, a modem cost about $600, and I grew up in Etobicoke, west of Toronto, delivering the Etobicoke Guardian for about $40 a month. And I realized it was going to take quite a long time to be able to make enough money to buy a modem for my computer. So I thought, well, maybe I can use my basic programming skills to actually create something that people would want to buy. And at Kmart, they always had a rack of different software, recipe management programs, financial planning software, things like that. So my friend and I decided that we would create a program to help people manage and organize their sports cards. We didn't know anything about market research or planning a business. We just spent months line by line writing this software. And my aunt decided she would help us print out some flyers. We went all over Etobicoke and down into downtown Toronto to post our flyers. And she said, well, you need to come up with a name for your business. And my name was, my friend's name was Sean, my name was Michael, so we decided we'd call it S&M Enterprises. But our parents said, it's not that you're better than Sean. They said, your name should go first, and we'll explain it in 10 years. So M&S Enterprises was born. We had a stamp, we had our flyer, and we went all over the city and posted these flyers to promote our software to people. And unfortunately, not one person ever called to buy our software. So either all the flyers blew off telephone poles, or it just really wasn't an idea anyone was interested in. And that was really my first experience really learning about the power and the value of failure. Obviously, I wasn't as optimistic about it back then, but I found this great quote that I've shared with many young entrepreneurs now, which is, I haven't failed, I found 10,000 ways that don't work, from Thomas Edison. And in fact, over the years, going between my startups and now to running a charity, a lot of people have always asked, especially investors in the for-profit sector, what have you learned from your greatest failure? They want to know that you've had some of these experiences and you've learned something from it. In fact, someone who's only been successful may not be prepared. And even in the nonprofit sector, organizations often hide their failures because they don't want to jeopardize their funding. But one of my favorite groups down the street here, Engineers Without Borders, they publish every year a failure report where they document and share everything they've learned from all the things that didn't work out. Imagine if school districts did that. It's that kind of radical transparency where we want to embrace and share the things that didn't work so we can learn from them. But I find that often there's this fear of failure, both within a personal context and at a meta organizational level too. So trying to change that is really important. And in fact, Dr. Seymour Papert, who wrote the book The Children's Machine from MIT, he talks about the fact that he thinks every student in the kindergarten, grade 1, should have an opportunity to experiment with programming. The trial and failure and error that comes, and I feel like for me, I never took any formal instruction, university degree on computer science or programming, but I feel like I gained so many critical problem-solving, critical thinking skills from those real-world experiences, building websites, trying to make things work, and failing most of the time. So encouraging and supporting, creating a supportive environment for failing. There's this whole movement called Failing Forward, is really something we try to encourage. And speaking of encourage, our parents did want to encourage us, so they bought us each our own modem anyways. It was, we were off to the races. I was able to call up Sean over this telephone line, and soon after that, my parents bought us our own phone line because they were sick of hearing modems screeching and talking to each other whenever they picked up the phone. And that was really the beginning of the online community. This idea of a bulletin board system. It was almost like the internet with just 2 people on it. And so I started my own bulletin board in grade 6. And by grade 7, my friend's dad had a small business, and he made the mistake of giving us one of those CompuServe CDs that was being sent around in the mail back then, along with his Visa card, and asking us if we could find a way to help him promote his business on his World Wide Web he'd been hearing so much about. We didn't quite figure that out for him. His bill that first month, I think, was $400 or $500. But we did discover this amazing community of people from places and countries we'd never even heard of before. And we heard of these students down in California that were starting their own website called Yahoo. And the idea they had on this website was to sell pictures as advertising to different companies. And at that time, I was in grade 8 media class. We were learning about all different types of advertising and marketing. And so I dragged in my dad's computer and projector, which was probably the size of this whole table back then. And I said to my friends, why don't we create our own website? And so in 1995, early 1996, we launched the Internet Exposed, which was kind of exposing how easy the internet was to use. And I was lucky to have been paying attention in grade 7 grammar class, where I basically went to the library, got a copy of the computer magazine, and wrote an email to every single company in there saying, I'm a journalist, I have this website about technology, and this is my home address if you'd like to send me your products for review. And I think my parents thought by then I was committing credit card fraud. Almost every day, the FedEx or UPS truck would come with different products. It didn't matter that I was only 14 or 15 or 16 years old. You know, it didn't matter. We had just as much authority as anyone else. And our website grew from that first year to something much bigger. And that was when I met Don Tapscott. He had written a book in 1997 called Growing Up Digital, The Rise of the Net Generation. And in that book, he was kind of predicting the fact that this generation of young people born kind of after 1980 would be really creating a lot of pressure on governments, on the education system, on companies as consumers. You know, how would they react to the fact that there's this expectation now that so much of how young people, this generation wants to interact, makes use of digital technologies. And I actually worked on a summer program for Don Tapscott's website, and actually the first time I ever spoke was at his book launch. I remember kind of trembling with my little piece of paper talking about my friends and I that had built the website. And I asked Don after if he'd be a mentor for me as I worked on my projects, and he said, well, I'll be a mentor for you if you'll be a mentor for me. He said everyone should have a mentor twice their age, but also a mentor half their age. So I thought that was pretty cool, and we've been friends since, and he's given us a lot of input and feedback. And one of the things he told me back then was, you know, why not partner with other people in other countries to make the site bigger? So we grew from 1,000 people a month to 10,000 people a month by 1998 to 100,000, and by 1999 we had over 1 million people a month reading our articles about technology and different resources and tools. And I think if anything, the site was so popular because it was all written in very understandable English. We were all high school students still in English class, and so it was very easy for us to communicate in a way that people could understand. And we had some of the world's largest technology companies advertising, spending money to promote their business. But you might imagine that we had a bit of trouble getting investors seriously. When I was in grade 12, I convinced my guidance counselor and principal to let me do co-op for myself. So I had half a day every 2 days. And at that time, my business partner was named Michael Heyman. He lived halfway around the world in Australia. And so I bought him a flight. He moved to Canada after high school. But we didn't know anything about work visas or incorporation. And we got laughed out of the office of almost every single investor we went to meet with. And so in 1999, we made the difficult decision of selling that website to a company down in New York City called Internet.com. You know, it wasn't for the tens or hundreds of millions that sites sell for today. It was a couple million split between a bunch of us, but it was enough that it was front page news, as you heard on the Globe and Mail. We were invited to speak to conferences all around the world, and I was also on the Oprah show, as I think Sean mentioned, which I think I would have been much more terrified if I realized how many people actually watch Oprah. I never did with my friends after school. And so what happened after some of these experiences was that I was flooded with emails from young people and students all around the world asking for help, mentorship, advice, support, venture capital. I realized how lucky I was to have my parents and my principal and my teachers supportive of my ideas. And I realized how many young people out there didn't have that support. They had an idea for something they wanted to do, a nonprofit project, a community organization, a business they might have wanted to start. And I realized there wasn't really a place out there for these students. I looked at websites like Teen People, and it was so focused on celebrities and cosmetics and advertising. There wasn't this kind of non-commercial space. And so I was actually at a reunion in Ottawa with some others I had worked with at that summer program, and one of them was named Jennifer Corriero. She was running a program called Girls Are It, funded by IBM to help girls build their technology skills by using social issues. And so we kind of had this brainstorm. I thought, well, how can I respond to all these different ideas and questions and needs young people have? What kind of organization maybe could we create that kind of helps to connect the education system, community centers, libraries? We were kind of imagining what the future of community looked like for young people in a global context. And so this was Halloween 1999, just over 15 years ago. And we decided that night that we would work together and we would launch a charity based here in Toronto, kind of with a national and global focus, called Taking It Global, or Taking IT Global. And the mission we have is to empower young people everywhere to understand and act on the world's greatest challenges. So we really wanted to explore how we could use and leverage these digital technologies that I was so passionate about to connect young people more to social justice, social innovation, all these different social issues, and connect them with others to really create this community, a learning community and action community. And so it took us about a year, but we launched our first website. This is a more recent version called tigweb.org or takingitglobal.org. And you can probably barely make out in the top left our tagline of inspire, inform, and involve. So we look at that, we talk about that as our pathway to action. And we've designed over the last 15 years a whole series of different programs and resources and tools that help educators and help students themselves kind of go along that pathway, from being inspired to getting more informed about whatever it is they care about, to getting involved in taking action. And we've now organized our work in these 3 different program areas, trying to address these 3 key challenges that I'll share a little bit about. So the first is digital youth engagement. So how can we use technology to foster a sense of global citizenship and civic leadership amongst young people today, addressing the issue of hope, that I'll talk a bit more about later. Global education, how can we partner with educators like all of you? And I'm thrilled to have this opportunity today, and it's really an honor to be working globally with over 30,000 teachers in over 140 countries to bring some of these programs and ideas into classrooms to foster a deeper sense of global understanding. And finally, as an outcome, we really try to inspire social innovation. We want young people to see themselves as being able to have a career in the social sector, being able to create positive social change as a commitment in their life, as something not that they only have to volunteer and do, but as a job or a career they can have to address the area of engagement. And so when we started out, it only took about a year before we were invited to our first education conference, and we started looking into some of the research in terms of student engagement in schools. One of the first studies that we came across was this study called Students in Today's Schools. And this was done by the United States Department of Education, and it started in 1983, right when the Commodore 64 was launched. They asked graduating students in grade 12 whether they thought their schoolwork was meaningful, whether they found their courses interesting, and whether they think what they learned in school would be important later in life. And you can see ever since the Commodore 64 to 2000, when they stopped doing the survey for whatever reason, the numbers weren't necessarily headed in a good direction. And I think this kind of points to the lack of investment that I feel like they made south of the border, and to a certain extent here, the investment in really helping to prepare and invest in educator capacity to bring all these immersive technologies that have engaged our generation outside the classroom. How can that be integrated inside the classroom? And in fact, P21, some of you have probably heard of the Partnership for 21st Century Skills. The quote in their report, which came out the same year, was they kind of predicted, they said the education system faces irrelevance unless we bridge the gap between how students live and how they learn. And so I think this is a bit of a snapshot of data that maybe shows some of that disconnect. In the United States, more recent data by Pearson, they studied over 50,000 students and found that 46% of high school students there say they find school boring. And of course, being in Canada, I know that we all think, well, that's the United States, things are much better here. To a certain extent they are, but actually there are some similar challenges. The Canadian Education Association did a study a year and a half ago called What Did You Do in School Today? And they found quite a high level of intellectual engagement in grade 5, about 82%. But by grade 12, it drops to only 45%, a pretty huge drop. And so there's something that we're doing or we're not doing in the middle school and high school years that's really, we're losing the attention and engagement of a lot of students. And for us, we really think that it connects to this challenge of relevance. 81% of students in the high school study for student engagement in the US give the reason for that boredom is they're just not interested in the material, and 42% say it's because of lack of relevance. So how do we address that? How do we increase the relevance? So when we look at the power of engagement, because I think it's easy to say, well, student engagement is kind of a fuzzy concept. Does it really make a difference? Gallup does a national student poll of over, I think, 200,000 or 300,000 students every year. And what they found is that a 1% increase in student engagement overall in a school was correlated to a 6% increase in reading achievement and an 8% increase in math. So that kind of fuzzy concept of engagement actually does make a pretty powerful impact on academic achievement. When we look at this gap of understanding, there's been 2 different studies. One big one is the Global Skills Gap by British Council in the UK. And they found that employers rate the knowledge and awareness of the wider world that an applicant has as more important than their degree or final grades. So obviously it's important to have a baseline of academic achievement. When you have, for us, we have 150 people sometimes applying for a volunteer position at our charity. How do you tell people apart? It's often not their grades in their school. It's the other things they do. It's their, the travel, the volunteer experience globally, the international context that people have. It's super important to build those things. And finally, looking at hope, and this kind of goes back to this hope study that I didn't share in this presentation, but there was a question asked, how many young people feel like the world is becoming a better place? And only 13% globally agreed in BBDO's last survey. When we look at the value of hope, Gallup's report also looks at hope, along with another recent article in the Research and Personality Journal. And they found that hope is a more robust predictor of academic success beyond high school, so college success, than the GPA, SAT, ACT scores in the United States or personality in the UK. So ensuring that students have this sense of hope and have this sense of belonging and see this anchoring learning and relevance, I think can make a huge difference. And I think you as a Catholic board with the Catholic graduate expectations, having some of these alignments that are even stronger than the public board, have a huge opportunity to make some of this work come to life. And so for us, that's really what we try to do through our work at Taking It Global, is support young people individually and educators in bringing, in addressing those issues and bringing projects to life in their schools that engage students. Since we've launched this year, we're going to hit our 50 millionth young person. We have now almost 4 million young people a year that are part of these programs. And they've shared on the site more than 1 million resources, projects, and ideas. So much of what I'm sharing today was not my idea. You know, we've really tried to be responsive to educators, to students over the last 15 years to build resources and programs that use technology to bring a lot of these values to life in a global context. And being global, it's obviously important not just to be in English and in Canada being in French, but we launched a platform in 2004 that allowed our members to translate what I'm sharing and what we've done. And it's now been launched in 13 different languages, including Arabic, Russian, Swahili, Romanian, Turkish, simplified Chinese. So quite a huge kind of global community. And part of that is to address the fact that the majority of new internet users actually no longer speak English as a first language. So that's really the question, is how can we serve those people with more content? And so it took us about 5 years, but in 2006, we were the only Canadian organization to receive a grant from Microsoft in the US to help scale our work as part of the Partners in Learning program. And to do that, we partnered with Chris Deedy at Harvard, who was kind of a mentor for us, and we launched a dedicated section of our site. So when you go to tigweb.org, takingglobal.org, you'll see on every single page a link that says For Educators. And that leads into this educator section where we have a community of teachers. You can search and find collaborators. We have free lesson plans and resources. We have programs. We have a projects database, all kinds of rich content directly to serve teachers. So a kind of private zone and space in there to address that. And so for us, and I know there's a few questions here on Twitter from Andy and from Mitch talking about engagement. You know, how do you measure that? What is engagement? For us, that has been one of the things we've really tried to think about, is what can we actually measure in schools that kind of gives us an indicator of engagement? And for us, we've really looked across these 3 value areas: global citizenship, student voice, and environmental stewardship. And so we had this idea about 1.5 years ago to create a program that actually would help us measure these things in schools. And we thought, well, we're not necessarily the experts. We don't want to go ahead and just put up our own ideas. But as part of a degree I completed at OCAD's Inclusive Design Institute, we actually crowdsourced over 4,000 different people from over 100 countries, participated in giving us ideas for how we could measure engagement, how we could measure these different value areas at a school. And to kind of do that, we launched a program called Future Friendly Schools that I'll talk a bit more about. So we're definitely trying to figure out, how can we support the conversation around engagement, empowerment through the lens of these 3 values. And so we really see that engagement comes from these 3 key ingredients that kind of form part of what we think are effective learning. So the first is relevance. Does what students are learning, does the assignment or project-based learning opportunity they have provide opportunities for real-world problem solving? So are they addressing something? Are they looking at an issue that's real in the world? And do they have an opportunity to actually contribute, not just in theory, but in practice, to addressing that issue through their learning outcomes? The second is authenticity. So how is what students are developing, how are their kind of learning artifacts and documentation, how can that be showcased even just within the school? And I know many of you are already doing this, but especially even to a global audience. And we've created a few different programs that I'll share with you that give your students a global audience for their work. And finally, depth. How can we create learning opportunities and learning projects that are so deep and engaging that students want to participate in them beyond just the context of the curriculum and the school day, really engaging them beyond their homework? And so that really leads to the program I mentioned, this Future Friendly Schools program. And what I want to do is share with you the program that Taking It Global through the lens of about 15 principles. So each of these 3 program areas or values has 5 principles that came from this global crowdsourcing from teachers and students and school leaders and parents around the world. And I'll just share some of the ways that our programs at Taking It Global help to address these principles. So for global citizenship, the principles are community engagement, global learning, professional learning, school culture, and school partnerships. And so when we look at community engagement, what we're really trying to do is support collaboration in our communities or globally with nonprofits. And so one of the things we looked at was, obviously people are working on these kind of projects different times throughout the year. So how can we develop a resource that helps teachers align whatever they happen to be doing or a project they want to develop with a timely opportunity to connect globally during whatever month that might be. And so what we've launched is a section we call International Days, and it's a collection of over 100 different internationally recognized days, mostly recognized by different governments or the United Nations or different global nonprofits. And so if you're thinking, okay, I'm looking to do some sort of a global unit in April or in February, you can go into February and see, okay, February is World Radio Day, or February is International Polar Bear Day. And so maybe I can do a project that culminates on that day so that my students can see how what they're doing has an impact globally, how it connects to things that are happening around the world. And it's often even a great way to get media attention, because the media is always trying to anchor things to these timely days when you can, when there's always global buzz around what's happening. December 1st next week is World AIDS Day, and there's all kinds of things happening there. So for every single one of these months, you can click on them and you can explore. We've got at least 5 different resources for every month, whether it's a link to a nonprofit, a lesson plan, an e-card, an educational game, different resources that support those kind of collaborations happening, whether they're or global. And to support those local collaborations, we also have a database of over 30,000 nonprofits, many here in Canada and many around the world, that your students could research and connect with as part of their research or as part of their projects in those areas. The second principle I want to speak a little bit about is global learning. So this is how can we integrate global issues and perspectives across different subject areas. And so for us, what we've tried to look at is across a diversity of different subjects, we started with the Global Gallery. And this was inspired by a young artist who came to us at a conference at the Skydome Youth Leadership Conference. And she said, well, your website's great. You've got organizations, you've got discussion boards, but what about artists? How can we as artists showcase our culture, our work, our reflections with a global audience? And so back in 2002, we were thrilled to have some support from HP that allow us to send digital cameras and scanners all around the world to young people who became kind of community hubs. This was back when digital cameras cost almost $1,000. So obviously today, you can get a digital camera probably for $20. It's Black Friday today. I'm sure there's lots of deals. But back then, it was a much larger challenge to get access to technology. One of our members in Afghanistan had to travel almost a week to Pakistan nearby to actually pick up his camera because there was no mail service at the time. And that helped us build this amazing collection of over 40,000 pieces of student artwork. This is one from Taiwan that won a contest. We often partner with different institutions too. Last year, we partnered with the new Canadian Museum for Human Rights. And we had a student from every province and territory selected for their artwork on human rights to attend the groundbreaking for the museum and to meet the Queen and Prime Minister, who got to see their work. So obviously an amazing way to connect the online and virtual with the real world too. And we're running a contest right now looking at moments of inclusion and places people feel connected to across Canada. And the winning submissions are actually going to be featured at Winterlude in Ottawa in February. So always looking at ways we can blend art. So if there's any art teachers out there, we'd love to engage your students and they can use the Global Gallery. And so all the online tools and resources I'm sharing today are all completely free. You can view everything without signing up, so there's not even a requirement to sign up. And there's quite a powerful array of content that's searchable by issue, by country, or by subject area in many cases too. One of the newest sections we've just relaunched is looking at educational games. So how can we actually support any different subject area through engaging online experiences that maybe give students a game-based approach to learning about that issue. We created of our own, mostly in partnership with different universities. So you can see here, looking at tobacco, looking at food security with the University of Toronto. We have a game on the Orange Revolution, political science with York University. And our newest ones, we have 2 on mental health that were created with Dalhousie University's Sun Life Chair on adolescent health. Last year we worked with, we had some OISD pre-service teachers volunteering with us, and we've now added over 50 games that aren't ours, but are from other nonprofits. So we realized we have over 400,000 people a year that come to this section. And we thought we were kind of doing a bit of a disservice to the community if we were only promoting our own games. So we've researched and aligned all those games to different subject areas. And so you don't see it here, but on the left-hand side, if you visit this site, you can see by subject, you can click on any subject area, and you'll see all the games that are aligned to that subject area. We've also highlighted some amazing work that's been done here by a group called Change Gamer at University of Toronto schools, and many of these games have lesson plans attached directly to them already. So hopefully some of you who want to introduce game-based learning might enjoy the online game resource. One of my favorite games as an example of that is AET, The Cost of Life. This was created through a partnership that we were a part of between Global Kids and an organization called Game Lab and a nonprofit in Haiti. And this is a game that kind of simulates the experience and the challenges of really decision-making in a developing world context. So students have to pick a priority: health, happiness, education, or money. And then they have 4 years to try to survive and make different decisions. And they encounter different challenges that the family faces. And often the challenge the first time, this is kind of based on the Sims type framework. Normally the first time you play this game, and I challenge all of you to check it out later on, your entire family will die because inevitably you won't think about some of the decisions you have to make. And that doesn't happen in the Sims. You pick the color car or the walls you make. And we have 4 different lesson plans that go along with it. So it's really trying to see how can we foster some of the skill development. Obviously, we think that it would be great if every student had a service experience overseas, but trying to scale that sense of privilege. And I think the understanding of the complexity of poverty, too, is something we're really trying to work on and support. And finally, one of my favorite sections, one of the most popular ones, this was actually this was inspired by a group of middle school teachers we worked with. And actually, my co-founder right now is up at a school in Scarborough working with the principal that was a big supporter a decade ago when we were first getting started. And those teachers were organizing a Global Issues Film Festival amongst their school students. And they gave us some feedback. They said, it's really difficult for our students to have to go to all these different sections and find content on one issue. It'd be really useful if you had one page for each issue that brought together primary source content, student-created content, and kind of in a mix. And we've recently relaunched this Global Issues section where it now doesn't just include our own content and that of other nonprofits, but we've also pulled in facts and statistics. We pulled in YouTube videos that are educational, and we've also curated Twitter playlists for every major global issue. So really trying to make it easy for students to have access to a diverse range of vetted perspectives on any particular global issue they might be looking into. And then finally, in this global citizenship space, we're looking at school partnerships. How can we facilitate service learning and curriculum collaboration and broker more partnerships across schools? And one of the key ways that we do that is through a really powerful partnership that kind of came together by fluke at a conference I was speaking at a few years ago in Alberta, where I met one of the most amazing teachers that I know in the world named Terry Godwald. And he started something in his high school called the Center for Global Education. He was trying to organize video conferences, and because he would try to get good guest speakers, and they would say, oh, you're a teacher in a school. I'm kind of busy. I can't really speak with one school. So he just made this up. He said, I'm the program director of the Center for Global Education. And all of a sudden, everyone started saying yes. And so with him, we launched this program called Global Encounters, which offers several video conferences a month on different global issues, bringing together guest speakers and students all over Canada and around the world. And so if any of you have video conferencing equipment or are keen to join a diverse array of video conferences, I'd really encourage you to look into this and think about joining. This is just a photo from a recent one. On bullying that we did with the RCMP, where we had the winner from So You Think You Can Dance. You can see him there in the bottom left. And what we try to do is not just have a guest speaker come and share with students, but students develop projects beforehand. They have online discussions. They're mentored by university students in similar programs. And then the students actually present their projects to the speakers. So it really is a student-directed kind of focus and not just a talking head on a video conference. So really looking at how we can kind of shift that model. Just 2 weeks ago, we worked with Polar Bears International. It's the second year. I was up there last year. This year, I actually gave Terry the opportunity to go up and spend a week in the Arctic with 4 climate scientists. And we ran a series of video conferences from the shores of Hudson Bay for students to learn about global warming and climate change from scientists where they could see polar bears out the window. We actually also worked with TVO Kids 2 weeks ago. We had over 200,000 students. Some of your students were probably watched during the 3:30 to 6 o'clock time slot. We Skyped the scientists in, and students all around Ontario asked questions. So we're always looking for how can we leverage this technology and these conversation kind of pieces to create more engaging learning experiences that really bring the content to life through the people that are having these experiences around the world. And we're thrilled to have partners like Cisco that have donated much of the technology that make this possible, including WebEx, which I'm using today. So when we look at collaboration, one of the data points which shows, I think, why it's so important is in the TALIS, OECD's Teaching and Learning International Study, which was just released a few months ago for last year. They actually found a direct correlation between professional collaboration amongst teachers and job satisfaction. So collaboration actually results in more satisfied teachers. So if you feel like you need a boost in satisfaction, maybe collaboration is one way to get there. The second area of values I wanted to share is looking at student voice. So with student voice, we're trying to focus on learning environment, school culture, school policy, student leadership, and student-centered learning. So some examples around this really begins for us in student leadership. How can we foster kind of this social justice, this civic leadership? About 12 years ago, we created a guide to action to support grade 8 leadership curriculum. And we released it in Creative Commons format, which means there's no charge to use it. It's a downloadable online guide that walks students through the process of creating sustainable social change initiatives. Over the last decade, it's been downloaded over 1.2 million times. It's been translated now into 6 languages. And we've now created 6 topical guides looking at issues like mental health, global warming, online volunteering. We have one on HIV/AIDS. We have one on expressions and art. And one of the things we're most excited about is we partnered just a few months ago with McGraw-Hill, and this year's new grade 10 civics textbook that came out in September actually embeds our guide to action throughout the textbook. So we're not just offering this as an external resource that's free of charge, but also partnering with the publishers, both Pearson and McGraw-Hill in North America, to infuse some of these ideas, some of these action planning tools and real world content into the resources as well. And for us, we're trying to look at, how do we create a pathway to action through this work? So it's not just helping the students come up with ideas and put together a plan, but then how do we actually support them in developing their projects? And we were very lucky to have some support from the Pearson Foundation to launch a course called the Sprout e-course that we offered to hundreds of high school and university students over the last few years. And we've given away over $500,000 in grants, in small grants, to student-led projects around the world that have come out of this process. So Sprout Ideas is an online facilitated course that we run a few times a year that students can apply for. And we also have a program called Sprout Self, which is a self-guided free course students can sign up for anytime to kind of build leadership skills. And last year we piloted something called the Sprout Ideas Camp with OCAD University, and this year we'll expand to York, and maybe we'll come and do one with you, which is a week-long summer camp where students learn about and reflect on social justice issues and then create digital artifacts that express their interests. So last year was grade 4 to 8 students, and they all learned how to use Scratch, and they created digital games, which you'll see on the Sprout Ideas website, that teach their peers about different global issues. And we were blown away at the richness of the issues they picked. We thought a lot would be, environmental issues, animal rights, things like that. We had students looking at Aboriginal children's rights, smoking, drinking, and driving. They created some really powerful games and resources with our industry partners. And then they came together at the art gallery at the end of the week and showcased those games to their parents and the community. So how can we actually help sprout and develop and students launch these ideas, matching them both with the training, the mentorship, and the funding through different corporate partners is another focus of ours. And finally, obviously talked a lot about what we do, but we're not doing this in a silo. We're really trying to encourage more collaboration amongst nonprofits in this space. We've worked with about 40 nonprofits here in Ontario and about 30 others around the world as part of an initiative we've launched called Youth Movements to try to share information. So what is working and what's not when we talk about student engagement, when we talk about student-led development. How do we create more sustainable, more successful initiatives? How do we help students who are launching projects make those projects as effective as possible? And so to do that, we've launched partnerships with groups like the International Baccalaureate last summer for their student conference, photo of one with the United Nations Habitat Fund, where they give over 100 grants a year to young people. And we built this reporting portal so they could use their cell phones to keep each other up to date on what's happening with their projects, what they're learning, what's working and what's not. So trying to create more knowledge sharing in the sector as a focus. And then beyond student leadership, also looking at student policy. And I know there have been a few tweets and questions about student voice, people mentioning student voice and looking at how we can bring a deeper student voice into the conversation. We've kind of been looking at student voice in a few different levels. There's obviously school policy and student trustees and student leadership. I know you have a student trustee at the board, but also how can we make that a global conversation? So to do that, we recruited about 30 students from 25 countries last year, and we gave them the opportunity to speak, and we had a whole panel on the future of learning with a conference called the Education World Forum, where over 140 ministers of education were gathered, including 4 from Canada, to hear this global conversation from students. And Cisco provided their offices as a way to kind of do this global video conference. So trying to look at student voice from a leadership perspective, from a policy perspective, and also obviously looking at student-centered learning as well. And finally, with environmental stewardship, looking at connections to community, health and well-being, interdisciplinary work, policies and practices, and the outdoors. So first, when it comes to policies and practices, how do we actually encourage and track and almost engage in friendly competition in terms of minimizing and monitoring our use? And I'm sure you probably have some eco-schools on the board. Eco-schools have been a big initiative. One of the things we've launched to try to support that on a personal level is a mobile tool called Commit to Act. And this was initially a mobile app, but now it's available on any mobile platform or device. And it's essentially an environmental action tracker. So any student or any teacher or any school can go in. You can see all the different actions you can take to reduce your impact on the environment. Let's say like having a low carbon lunch, a meatless lunch. And then you can go in and track that you did that. You can upload a photo and you earn points. And you can actually engage in a friendly competition between schools or districts. You can set this up as a month-long initiative. So would really love to collaborate with anyone who's interested in using this in their classroom. Right now, over the last month, we've been partnering with the City of New York and their Twin City program, which runs in about 30 cities around the world in 6 clusters of cities, and they've been competing amongst their cities. We've had almost 4,000 actions tracked amongst their 4 different clusters. So this is one tool we provided that, again, is completely free for students to learn about, track, and share using their social networks, the actions they're taking. When it comes to health and well-being, we're looking at healthy and sustainable food options. I'm not sure, and this is actually part of the survey that Future Friendly Schools kind of embarks on. So both teachers and students would give feedback. This is often one of the areas that's pretty low in many schools. So, is there really that commitment to a low carbon lunch, which stands for local, organic, and waste-free food? So this could be a challenge you run for a month. It could be Meatless Mondays. We have a whole curriculum that was supported by the Staples Foundation that looks at how we can encourage reducing our impact on the environment through the food we eat, because it actually makes a bigger difference. For example, to be a vegan and eat vegetarian meals, hybrid carb. The food we eat has a huge impact on the planet. And finally, looking at interdisciplinary work, how can we bring in and infuse environmental issues across subjects? And to kind of exemplify that, I want to share a project that was launched by a network of schools in Asia called Deforest Action, where they actually heard a keynote from an author named Jean-Francois Richard from the World Bank, who wrote a book called High Noon, 20 Global Issues and 20 Years to Solve Them. And in his book, he basically calls out the fact that unless we do something about issues like deforestation in the next decade now, because it's already been 10 years since he wrote the book, not a lot of progress has happened. So these students in schools developed this project where they learned about the causes of deforestation, which involved a lot of the production around palm oil. They learned about the fact that a lot of deforestation in the world is illegal. More than half of it in Borneo, for example, is illegal, and the communities just can't keep track. And then they learned about the importance of education initiatives, both in developed countries where the products we consume often might be contributing to that impact, but also in the developing world, it's often impacted places like Indonesia and Borneo. People don't have the opportunity they have around ecotourism or other crops beyond palm oil. So they raised funding. You can see almost $100,000 for local education initiatives. They, in both Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, they were mentioned in the Senate for their work in introducing truth in labeling bills to actually label the source of palm oil. They convinced a number of companies that produce cookies and snacks, like Arnott's that produces Tim Tams, to use only sustainable palm oil by next year is the commitment they've made. Things like Kit Kat, Nutella, a lot of products like that contain palm oil, so it was really eye-opening for the students. And when you go on the website, I'm not going to try to stream a video over the live stream, but there's some amazing, especially we had mostly primary schools involved in this project, so amazing videos of students reflecting and sending messages to some of these companies that were well received because they realized these are their consumers of the future. We also worked with Esri, one of the leaders in geospatial imaging, to launch the ability for students to log in and actually monitor weekly satellite data updates. So on a weekly basis, students could actually monitor their own little chunk of the rainforest and then report to local nonprofits if they saw an intrusion happening. And we actually won an award from the European Space Agency for this work, and we're able to get a satellite company to actually donate this data. It was going to cost about $30,000 a month, which we never could have afforded. And that's why the communities were never able to track illegal deforestation in many cases. So this has now been used as a model and is being implemented in South America as well. And there was a filmmaker that came. So one of the things that happened is the primary and middle school students wanted to actually see what was going on the ground. And so they recruited They actually ran a video contest where over 200 high school and university students over 18 submitted videos of why they should be selected to go to Borneo and help implement some of these projects. And the students voted and selected this group of 12 that went there. And a film just came out this year, just a few months ago in Australia, and just this month in Canada, called Rise of the Eco Warriors, which is a documentary you could screen in your school that tells the story of this whole journey. So really looking at connections across the curriculum. Obviously something like Earth Watchers has strong ties to the math curriculum. There's science connections, connections around English, writing stories, producing films. I think this is a great example of kind of an interdisciplinary project that has seen teachers partner across almost every subject area. So I wanted to close before going to some of your questions, and I'd be thrilled to, I can't wait to see, I've been kind of following, there's lots of tweets going on, so I'm trying to catch up with them. But I wanted to share a little bit about the impact, because when we first got started with this work, a lot of people said, well, it's just a website. You know, how can getting involved in a website be any different than just a book? You know, does this kind of community spirit of engagement really change anything? And so over the last 7 years, we've been doing a longitudinal study to really try to understand how this kind of online community and online engagement relates to offline behavior in students. And then the last cohort of this study, what we found is that 89% of students talk about awareness. So the fact they're obviously being exposed to many different cultures, people, and places. You know, most social networks, we talk about ourselves as almost like a social network for learning or social good, are about connecting with the people you already know. But taking it global is actually completely different. It's about learning about people and places that you've never even heard of before. So definitely trying to foster that cultural awareness. 2/3, 66%, have increased their volunteer activity. So they're volunteering more often and they're more engaged in their community. 82% are talking more about local and global issues. You know, a lot of people today talk about the fact that, you know, kids don't care about the news, they don't care about what's going on in the world. What we found is that if you make it actionable for them, if you make it meaningful, if you connect it to their learning in a way that they can dig into and direct themselves, they're in fact very passionate and they definitely want to act. And I'm sure many of you have already seen that in the projects you've developed. 68% talk about skills they've gained or refined specifically through some of these programs and projects. 45% have collaborated in some way, and 27%, so almost just over 1 in 4, have actually started some kind of project in their school, in their country, or in their community. So we're pretty excited about the impact we've seen so far. One of the things that we've been really lucky to be able to do, is working a little more deeply here in Toronto. So we've actually launched 3 different professional development courses that are accredited at the graduate level for teachers to actually help design these kind of projects. So often people say, and for 15 years, I've given keynotes like this and it's been great. You know, people get excited, but you know, you go back to school the next day, we really need to provide sustained support for designing the kind of projects and initiatives that deeply make use of some of the tools I've shared today. And over the last 2 years, we had the opportunity through some funding from a local foundation to work deeply with almost 60 schools here in the Toronto District School Board to engage teachers, at least 3 per school, in the different courses we offer. And we had an independent evaluation done, and it's really exciting for us because what we found is that 93% of teachers say they gain new knowledge and skills that have direct practical value. We've been able to increase the ability to design student voice projects by 73%, and this is a self-reflection of teachers' skills and confidence. A 66% jump in this cross-cultural collaborations, and a 50% jump in generally integrating global education into the classroom. So this year we're hoping to expand the research into student impact, but we're really thrilled to be able to look at this kind of systems level change. And I'm thrilled to be able to speak to so many of you at once too, because I'm sure the kind of projects and initiatives you're already developing and hopefully will be inspired to go even more deeply with today will have that kind of an impact and benefit on your students as well. So I'm sure a lot of this has been a little overwhelming. I've just shared a brain dump of about 15 years of work, so I wanted to just share 3 thoughts on where to start. Within our educator section, we have a projects database where you can create and share a project you might already be doing, or you can look at projects, and this is a pretty new section. It's only launched a few months ago, so there's only a few dozen projects there so far. These are mostly projects from the Toronto School Board, but would really love for you to create and share a project you might want to do with other teachers around the world, and we'll do our best to match make you with other schools and partners on that. We are offering those 3 courses: project-based learning for global citizenship, student voice and education, and educating for environmental stewardship. And as part of me being here today, the team has also agreed to provide a few scholarships for teachers to take one. If you're interested, please follow up with Sean or send me an email. I would love to get you involved in the next cycle of those happening early next year. And then finally, we'd love for any of you to explore the Future Friendly Schools program, whether you actually go through the certification program or just look at each of these program areas. Everything is completely public on the site. So you can look at examples from schools around the world of how they've brought these values to life. We're really trying to create a living laboratory, a global community of schools really exploring what it means to really cultivate these values at a deep level. I would really love to have any and all of you join us on that journey, whether informally through sharing resources on Twitter and being part of the community, or formally by going through the learning process at your school and creating a portfolio to showcase your work. So I just want to end with this question, which is something we asked ourselves when we got started, and my co-founder was actually put on a Starbucks cup. Someone from Starbucks saw our keynote one day. And that's that I think we all wonder if our students were actively engaged in all aspects of society and thought of themselves as community leaders, problem solvers, role models, and key stakeholders, how would the world change? And so the conversation that I've begun with you today is to find out. And I know many of you are on the pathway to do that. Many of you are adopting these kind of ideas already. And I hope that some of what I've shared could be useful in supporting your journey. I would love to partner and work with as many of you who are interested and look forward to your feedback. I've left my email address here. We've only grown our work and our ability to do this through feedback, through input, through ideas from educators and students around the world. And so I hope that you'll have some ideas too. And I look forward to hearing and brainstorming with the team there how many of these ideas align with the graduate expectations and your own strategy and vision at the board. So thanks so much for having me. And I think we have at least 5, if not 10 minutes for questions. So I'm going to jump on Twitter and have a look at some of those. And if the team that wants to share a few with me as well, I know that I think they might be asking me some over audio. Andy mentioned you can't go global if we're not collaborating across schools, countries, regions, boards, provinces. I think that's a great point. Even within a district, I know your district is pretty geographically dispersed. It could just be starting with, having maybe a few teachers involved in one of those courses. Maybe we spread them out across the region, and you start with collaboration even across and between your own schools. Here in Toronto, our partnership was between 2 families of schools, which are separated just by about a 20 or 30-minute drive. But many of the teachers had never met or had the opportunity to collaborate. So there was a huge benefit from some of that collaboration. Joan asks about how to involve younger primary students, then mentions the TVO experience, which is really exciting as part of TVO Kids. For several of the resources I shared, like Deforest Action, get site under resources, there's separate primary or secondary resources for programs like that. And also in the resources section, we have a database of lesson plans, and as part of that, they're searchable by grade level. And so you can look at, of the several thousand free resources that we have published, most from teachers and nonprofits, you can actually search by specific grade or by primary or secondary or middle school. So we've tried to make it easy for educators to find resources that are most appropriate to doing that. Scrolling through here. A lot of feedback on the failing, which is great. Catherine asks about looking for resources for older learners that aren't juvenile, aimed at younger students. It's a great question. One of the things we've tried to do through our global issues section, if you look at, for example, working with those students and saying, what issues do you care the most about? We tried to curate a collection of videos, educational games, and websites on any one of those issues that are, I would say typically the content is more geared towards a middle and high school age group. So I would say that if you look at most of it, unless you're searching, as I mentioned, on that primary level, generally it is targeted towards older students. I'm not sure when you said older learners if you mean beyond high school, but there's definitely a wide variety of resources that are appropriate for different age groups. Some of the YouTube videos do a great job of explaining complex concepts to younger students, but then some of the Twitter feeds or the nonprofits that you might connect with through our site definitely are targeting an older age group too. Joan mentions learning opportunities that are relevant, authentic, and have depth leads to new pedagogies for deep learning. That's also a network that we're definitely connected with. We're good friends with with Greg and Michael, who are leading that initiative. And one of the things we're working on is actually looking at digital badges. Some of you have probably heard of kind of recognition of badges and how we can provide students with recognition of these different skills. One of the things we're looking at is developing a badge system in our learning space that actually allows peer-to-peer badging, so that students could give each other, +1 on skills, like some of you have probably seen on LinkedIn. And even the teacher can participate. And we actually had a teacher in Norway, I was at a conference last month, say, well, the students should be able to give the teacher badges. So looking at how we can use badging and then digital recognition systems to link into that assessment of those 8 C's that NPDL is focused on, along with many of the other skills and competencies that we look at as well. It's going to go up, and I know we have a few new ones here. Marcy asks about resources specifically to target special education population. It's something we've been working on. Actually, the superintendent here in Toronto we work with has recently moved to a role around special education. We're working to look a bit more specifically around that. I think the guide to action in general, and that, depending on the age group, obviously, of the students, the kinds of projects they're working on, allowing them to explore their interests and define the project that they'll develop. The guide to action is really intended to support that kind of an exploration process of developing their own projects. We're also doing a lot of work right now. We're about 70% of the way there in redesigning our website to be mobile responsive and to be fully accessible. So for students who might have special needs around reading or screen readers and things like that, we're also working on doing that. One of the ideas that's been proposed that we just haven't had the funding or manpower to do as a small charity is actually kind of creating some of the content on our website targeted towards different age groups or targeted towards students that might have other needs. So we're definitely very open to partnerships. If your special education department wanted to work with us to develop some content based on ours that we could, we're very open to collaboration to create more content. And Michelle had a great tweet about 30 minutes ago looking at seeing the teacher as a learner. How can you sustain wonder, curiosity, and engagement? And I know there's conversations about fostering an innovator's mindset. And I think that really comes from that wonder, curiosity, engagement, really comes from those opportunities around relevance. I'd really encourage some of you to look at that Global Encounters website and look at some of the video conference recordings. It's really giving students the opportunity to say, okay, here's what we're going to look at. Now, what kind of an initiative, what kind of project, how would you want to address that in the context of your school or your community? It's really keeping as much open as possible. I'm sure you're all aware of project-based learning. One of the big things is, that student-driven, creating that driving question that's like an ungoogleable, that's kind of more student-happy, than teacher-friendly maybe. How do you create an openness for students to really explore and be challenged and not have things set out for them as much, so that they really can foster that innovation mindset. Someone asked, what comes first, growth or innovation? I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's definitely a blend. I think we want to foster both, and certain people might be more interested in starting something new, others might be more interested in accelerating something that exists. So thanks for a lot of these great questions. One of the other things I wanted to share that I realized I didn't include a slide on is we've just relaunched a new brand here in Canada called Do Something. It was originally founded in the US as DoSomething.org, and the idea is basically to create many different opportunities for student action on different issues, and we're very interested and open to designing new projects with them. The first campaign we've launched here in Canada, there was a pilot last year, it's called Teens for Jeans, where we had over 20,000 pairs of jeans. And I'm just realizing that I don't think the screen is sharing, but 20,000 pairs of jeans donated to local homeless shelters. And there's 9 or 10 other campaigns. So from a civics and social justice and student leadership point of view, there's definitely lots of opportunities there as well, and trying to think about what are the small ways that we can, ladder students up to deeper engagement. I think for some students may be overwhelmed with the idea of creating their own thing. They may just want to participate in something very concrete. So I think it's also important to offer opportunities across the spectrum of engagement or civic participation, so that students are able to participate in or co-create something of their own. So I think we're just about at time. I will try to go through and see if I missed any questions and respond to you on Twitter, but really look forward to working with you and your schools over the coming years. I hope that you'll make use of the resources I've shared, and please reach out to me on Twitter or email if you have ideas for how we, or if you'd like to invite even one of our program managers to come in and Skype into your class or share some of these programs more directly. And I hope that some of you will be interested in taking one of those online courses with us too and developing projects like the ones we've shared. So thanks again for having me. I wish you a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks.
Michael, on behalf of the PVNC community, thank you so much for your inspirational words, taking the time to share your thoughts and ideas with us. The work you're doing is just amazing, and it fits so well with our mission in Catholic education. And I just want to say on behalf of the community members of PVNC, thank you very, very much for your time and your message. That concludes our live broadcast, everyone. We will take a break for lunch and then return for the site-based portion of your day.
Come and make a few comments.
Take care.
Not sure if I'll be able to hear them or not, but we'll see. Definitely think that kind of movement. In fact, one of my good friends, Gary Steger, wrote a great book called Invent to Learn. So if you're kind of new to the idea of the maker movement or maker spaces, check out that Invent to Learn book.